On today's episode, we are joined by Jim Campbell. He's the course leader of the BA Photography degree at UWE Bristol. We chat about photography higher education, what people can expect to take away, and how we can all take lessons from this and apply them to our own practices. So grab yourself a drink, let's get comfortable, and enjoy it.
Happy February, Tom. How are you doing?
Happy February. Yeah, doing all right, actually. Everything's all right. You know, we're still here.
We're through January.
Yeah, podcast is still going. Yeah, everything all right. How are you doing?
Not too bad. Got
funny old
new
month.
Arrival. Yeah,
you do have a new arrival. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Very exciting.
So bit of a life change, but all very positive and exciting and new and keeping me occupied.
I feel like we should kind of stipulate, because we are quite good gear nerds, well, nerdy gearheads on this show, that the new arrival is not, in fact, a bit of gear.
No, it's in fact a small human. Given your rate of returns as well, it's probably best.
Well, this is it, right? This is the worrying thing.
This one's
but honestly, from the very bottom of my heart, congratulations. Although that did actually sound really sarcastic, but there is something arriving for you in the post tomorrow that will say proper congratulations.
Oh, thank you very much.
So I hope you enjoy it.
Anyway, all this personal stuff making me squirm. Let's get on to more meaty topics.
You've had a new arrival this week, Greg.
No.
Now we're talking gear.
Right. No. What did I have? Yes, I did. I bought. It was very good. I bought a DigiPlate. I bought it before Christmas. It got dispatched after Christmas, and therein lies the issue, because it was coming from Belgium. And for a product that was €300, I got whacked with, what was it, 135 quid, £137, something like that, on import duties and brokerage fees. Yeah. And it's funny because, you know, I didn't know whether or not, because I'd ordered it before Christmas, I would have got away with it, but it comes down to when it was dispatched. And UPS obviously are having a hell of a time at the moment.
I think
UPS driver.
Anyone involved with shipping stuff at the moment is having a bit of a mare.
God, poor guy. I say poor guy, turned up and he was like, before you say anything, I don't take card and I don't carry any change. So I was like, so you're expecting me to have £137 in cash just waiting by the door? Anyway, needless to say, he didn't deliver the package that day. And their help team were anything but helpful. So yeah, God, it's just a bit of a fiasco. But ultimately, I do wonder if there's a whole load of companies that aren't trading normally at the moment and therefore haven't really taken into account what an absolute shitter it's going to be trying to deal with products coming from Europe.
Yeah, I've for years have often made orders from Thomann or Thomann. I'm not sure. They're based in Germany.
Okay. I thought it was like your German brother.
No, but they are a music store, but they stock a lot of Avenger grip. And I've always ordered. You know, they have very good pricing, and obviously when we were in the EU, not a problem. Ordered it, came in, great. Never had to pay anything. But now their prices are exclusive of VAT and import. And so now I spoke to them about it, and they said, yeah, if you buy this, I was looking at a stand, they said the import on it will probably be about 150 quid. I thought, well, that's not ideal. And the trouble is, I can hear people up and down the country going, but why don't you buy it in the UK? Because that is only stocked there. They don't with some of the stuff we're after, it has to come in from the States or Europe, because you know the people in the UK just don't seem to stock it.
Well, I mean, specialist kit that's made as well, like in parts of Europe, which there are bits of kit that are kind of produced on a small scale and what have you. I mean, Germany's a good example because it does do a lot of specialist equipment. They have large manufacturing there, and generally the stuff is of a high standard, so it's desirable to buy it from there. And if it isn't stocked in the UK, then you are buying it direct from source. But I do also think that there's just for companies, I'm so glad I'm not a company that is got major clients in Europe, because obviously it's the same going the other way. Trying to sell anything back to Europe must be a nightmare at the moment.
Yeah, I am a bit worried.
Who'd have thought it, eh? Who'd have thought it?
We definitely didn't predict it.
No one saw this coming.
The worry that I have is that when we all get traveling again, like, that is, they're starting to talk about carnets to go to France. And you go, if I then put £1,000 on, or however, 900 quid or whatever carnet costs, carnets seem to be very inflexible. They seem to, you've used carnets in the past, haven't you? They're very inflexible. You can't change what's on them. And, so really, unless you always use the same kit, they're kind of a one-job thing. And then if you're suddenly kind of whacking £900 on, on a small job, that could make you very unattractive. So, I do think it is worrying, and I really hope they kind of, realize, because what's very frustrating is that the government flat refused to talk about touring musicians, and obviously we would have been kind of classified in with that as a kind of a touring creative, but they apparently just weren't happy to include that in the deal, even though apparently the EU asked. Now the trouble is with all these things, you can say one thing and it's so fraught that either party could be telling a fib or something like that. But it is very frustrating to be the end user, the traveller, and being stuck now in this situation where we're told that we need carnets, and and if we're trying to bring stuff in, we're getting hit with big import charges. Because when you had the UPS thing, it didn't break it down, did it? It didn't say you owe £70 in VAT and something there. It just it had it as a miscellaneous government charge.
Yeah, and then a brokerage fee that they could basically, I guess, charge what they want. I mean, ultimately, it's going to be you wonder whether or not it will change. In a few years, whether stuff will be renegotiated or ironed out, or whether or not it's just going to be a case that I don't know. I don't know how companies will, if camera shops, for example, if they're buying anything from Europe, how they won't then end up passing that cost on to the consumer.
Oh, they will pass the cost on to the consumer, because business is business, right? Yeah. We will just become quite expensive. If you're buying a Leica, for example, now, and there is just about to be an extra 10, 15, whatever the percentage is going to be on top of it, you kind of desperately want to buy it now while the stock's in the UK before they have to bring more stock in, right? Because as soon as that,
are you working for Leica? You've got a lot of Leica to sell.
If I'm honest, I did just think, yeah, right. If anyone wants Leica stuff, hit me up. No, I did think, they were really the only German camera company that I could think of off the top of my heart, but off the top of my head. But I don't see prices staying the same for a lot of stuff. I do see it going up, which is good though, guys, because don't worry about it. There's loads of work, and the fees are crazy at the moment. So
let's not get negative this early in the morning.
No, absolutely not. Absolutely not. It actually is all going to bounce back. I had an email this morning, and a word for word, I can't find it. Oh damn! But word for word, it's all going to come roaring back. Don't you worry. And that's from someone in the know. So I do actually feel pretty positive about it. And yeah, not to worry.
No, because a lot of our listeners kind of listen to us when they're going on long dog walks or whatever.
Yeah.
And at this time of year when it's misty and cold, and then we're piping doom and gloom into their ears. Got to be careful, man.
Yeah, we are the doom and gloom merchants. Apologies. But yeah, I hope you're enjoying your dog walk, Terry. Well, I actually don't know what his name is, but I'll just guess. But yeah, it's going to be an interesting year. If you think what we're saying is wrong, would love to hear from you. please do, keep sending in questions and stuff into the pod. It gives us stuff to, obviously gives us stuff to talk about, but also it's nice to get opinions other than ours. So please do, please do drop us a note. I'll tell you what though, let us talk about something that is a slightly more positive thing. And now,
wait a minute.
You know where I'm going. Right, okay, so now the reason I wanted to talk to you about this is not because it's a new camera. Obviously, I've already priced it up, figure out how I can afford it, put my pre-order in, very excited. But I do want to talk about the Sony A1.
Go on.
Ooh. Right.
So I know nothing about this camera.
No. Okay. Well. Okay. Interesting.
Haven't really looked because Fuji brought out their new one about 2 days later, and again, even as a Fuji fanboy, I haven't looked at that.
I don't know how you feel, but I am very much. I was suffering from gear fatigue. Like
you don't sound like it, mate.
Well, I know. Sorry. Well, this is me. This is me being really unenthusiastic about gear. But there has been so much gear announced in the past year, and I understand that there has to be releases and stuff. But we've not all of us have been working as much as we were.
Are you feeling teased? Are you feeling tantalized and teased? They're dangling these new things in front of you, these new toys, and you're like, "No, stop it! I can't justify it."
Kind of in a way, but that's kind of why I wanted to talk about the Sony A1 because. Yeah. If I told you, if we had started this podcast a few years ago, and I had turned to you, because you and I, we both shoot motion, and we both shoot stills, and we both shoot high-res stills. If I had turned to you and said, Greg, I would love a camera that did 50 megapixel stills and did 8K video or 4K 120 in one camera body, you'd be like, I also would like that camera. That sounds like a good idea. And then what if I told you that if it then could shoot, because this actually I don't think would be useful for you or I, but I can totally see the application for it. This camera shoots 30 frames a second. And that's not 30 frames video. It does that obviously, but that is 30 50 megapixel files a second.
Yeah, but this then brings us on to your other favorite subject, which is hard drives, and I don't really want to go there again.
Do you know what? I've sworn off. I've decided that in 2021 we will only talk about hard drives 30 times.
Okay.
And I'm not going to waste the link.
Can none of them be on the podcast?
But the Sony A1 is an interesting one, and because I think you have to look at the bigger picture.
Yeah.
This is where the industry is going.
It is going to be a big picture, 50 megapixel.
It is. But here's the thing. This is going to be the specs to chase.
I thought you were going to tell me this is a camera that once I've got this, I'll be complete. I will never need to buy a camera again. I've had that so many times. Once I've got this, I'll be happy.
Now, I'm going to play devil's advocate with myself.
Okay.
Because it would be useful for some of my jobs. But for a lot of my jobs, I have to have a stills camera, right? But also, I'm boring myself. Oh my God. Oh, that's terrible timing. Terrible timing.
Genius.
Right. Big intake of breath. Let's go. Okay, so for a lot of my jobs, I have a stills camera. A lot of my jobs, I have a motion camera. Now, motion camera, to build up to what you want it for, you have to have an extra monitor. You have to have, if you've got a client on set that's got wireless preview, you want a digital transmitter. There are other things that you need. You probably want to put a grip on it. You'll probably want to put a handle on it. There's other things that you need for it.
Right.
So, because I have an A7S III and I have an A7R4, and that to me is the Sony A1. I understand that it's not quite that, but it's not far off the specs of the Sony A1 in two bodies. But I feel like the inclusion of all of these features in one body is brilliant. But
yeah.
This is it. You need to build up rigs to make them practical for shooting motion. Unless, however, you are going to be shooting quick run and grab stuff, and you have an ND filter on the front, and you can easily kind of work around it like that. But I do feel like it's going to be a really interesting. It definitely sets the bar for what a camera company should have as their flagship, and I will be really interested to see if Canon, for example, bring out a body like this and start cannibalizing their cinema line. With like an R1, I would be very interested to see if Nikon do something similar. I assume they actually probably, their financial situation won't. But it does also act as a halo product, which drags people towards it, because a lot of people will understand the camera for what it is, like you and I, and we go, that sounds like a great idea, fantastic, I'll have two. Whereas there will be a lot of people who go, oh, that looks like more camera than I'll ever need, but I can't afford it, or I can't, and it's something to attain, it's something to aim for. And it's because the high megapixel bodies they put out in the past, for example, you're looking at $2,500, $3,000, which actually, in the grand scheme of things, when you compare it to the cost of a phase, or if you compare it to the cost of the Fuji medium format, for example, very different cameras, but they're roughly around the same price point. Not the Phase and the Sony, but the Fuji. And I do feel like that is easier to attain than the A1, for example, which has been released at a list price of $6,500. But I think it's a very exciting time to be a content creator, with the companies who are actually going, what do you need? You need this? You can have it. And because Sony haven't worried about cannibalizing their cinema line, because they understand they're very different systems.
I mean, the one thing that do you find with mirrorless that you overshoot?
Oh, yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
I found with the Fujis, for example, they've got, if you're using an electronic viewfinder and the electronic shutter, so you don't even hear the shutter going, it's so easy to overshoot, because you're like, I'm just going to make sure I get this. I'll put it onto burst, and suddenly you're blasting away. And that's at like 8 frames per second. A camera that can do 30 frames per second, creating 50 megapixel files, I'd have to remortgage my house to buy the hard drive storage, or start going through and actually culling and deleting, which is something I always think, I will do that. But let's be honest, how often do you actually go through?
Yeah, no, I totally hear you.
So I love the idea of that and what that means and the capabilities of that. I do worry that I'd find, I'd be spending more money every year than I already am on updating hard drive systems.
It's a tough one. I feel more that I'm impressed as to what an incredible feat of design and engineering it is. Plus, also, the convenience for me means that at some point I will probably get a couple, but I am going to wait until the price drops.
So have you not actually pre-ordered?
No.
Good.
No, because if my wife is listening to this, we had a discussion about it, and I took the business case to her, and she said no. And actually, rightly so, because I set out, I was like, it would be convenient. She goes, I'm not having you spend £13,000 for a bit of convenience. And I said, fair enough.
Yeah. I think
that's where a lot of people will be at the moment.
Yeah. And I think ultimately, that's suddenly your processing power needs to go up. So you need to update your computer, you need to do this and you need to do that. And you have to weigh up actually how much is that. And we've talked about it before. It's something we probably both suffer from, but that gear acquisition syndrome, which is very easy to fall into, especially when you're quiet, of the sense of you obsess over something that you think will somehow change the way you work, or if I just have that light, or if I just have that camera body, if I just have that lens, it's going to fundamentally change everything, and it won't fundamentally change anything.
And it never does.
So
it never changes. No,
but the convenience, and that is an argument to be had there, definitely. And sometimes I find with kit that I will buy it when I really, really want it, and then I won't use it for a long time. And then when I finally do get around to using it, I'm like, this is really good. I'm glad I've got this. I've had time to kind of get used to using it, whatever. And now it's coming into its own. The problem with and I'm talking about kit in general, and that's not just camera stuff. That's, for me, that's like camping kit, which is another one of those things I love to kind of buy. You suddenly go, I really want that cook set, or I really want that kind of lightweight system there, whatever.
This has just got a bit intense,
and you end up kind of buying it and using it, right? Oh, I see. Sorry, missed that pun.
Thank you. Yeah.
But with gear that's technical, it doesn't work like that, because ultimately, by the time you actually then get around to using it a few months later,
it's been replaced by the latest and greatest,
and there's something else tantalizing you. And
I think that's where
going to be chasing your tail.
Yeah, and also it's a bit frustrating, because obviously you buy these cameras brand new, and then you kind of go, well, okay, well, I get 3 years out of that, and actually in that 3 years they've released 2 new models. What I'm leaning towards is, with obviously the great simplification that I've touched on before, is that, do I need it? Do I actually need it? Well, I would love the Sony A1, and I think it's a hugely important camera. Like, it is kind of like, it is for me a brilliant piece of design, but do I need it? I'll wait until I need to do an upgrade. Yeah. And I think this is I've had this big, obviously, I don't know if you know, but there's been a pandemic that's happened, and we've all had a bit of time to think. I really realized the problem with me and a lot of us is not the kit. It's not the kit. And the gear acquisition, that is us that is us just deflecting.
Oh, 100%.
And for me now, I am determined to shrink my kit down and get really good at using the same kit. Because since we've started this podcast, how long have we been doing now? 6 months?
Bit longer.
Okay, well, look, since I've known you, you've known me to do 4 system swaps, and the quality of my work has either stayed the same or dipped slightly, because I was not used to working with 4 different types of raw files. There's a lot to be said for consistency. And if you know exactly how your kit works, if you know exactly the level of highlight you can bring back in your raw file, if if you are completely used to it. I look back at some of the work I shot on the Canons, and the Canons I'd used for years, and I go, oh, yeah, I like that. And that was because I'd worked on those files for 5 years.
Well, if you imagine, like back in the day, with people using a certain film stock, they would know that they wanted to expose, a stopover because it was Kodak Portra, and they liked the way it then gave them a bit more of a punchy contrast or whatever. They would have, got to that position over decades of using the same film stock. And now we're changing camera systems every couple of years.
Yeah,
and if you stick with one brand, then you're going to get familiar with the sensors that they use. But even then, brands change their sensors and change, software then changes. If you go from processing this is one of my big bugbears with Capture One. If I process my Leica M10, raw DNG files in Capture One, I just don't like what I get from them. If I process it in Lightroom, which I no longer use, they're a much better file. And yet it's the exact opposite for everything else. If I process Fuji and Capture One, I get a better image than I do in Lightroom. So then even the software you're using starts to come in. I guess if you wanted to kind of make an analogy, it's similar to maybe different chemicals being made by different manufacturers or whatever in the darkroom and how you're developing. But it's frustrating, because ultimately I don't really care about any of it. I just want a system that works and that I can get really, really used to and doesn't change.
Yeah. No, I'm with you. And do you know who really doesn't care?
Our listeners.
Do you know who? Well, sorry, guys. Yeah, apologies. No, do you know who really does not give a flying poop?
Who?
Is the end viewer of the photograph.
Yeah, 100%.
The only person who cares is all of us. And that was a real, as I've been obviously doing a lot of very deep thinking, and I've been reading some really interesting books, but that is, obviously you've got to be happy in what you're producing, but actually I've been sending out a few things to people on WhatsApp, and they go, "Oh, what's this shot on?" And you go, "Doesn't matter."
I remember somebody once telling me, saying, if it's 80% right, it's right. And for me, that was a bit of a weird revelation, because it was, I'm somebody who would always want to get something, between 95 to 100% right, 98 to 100% right. I want it to be bang on. And it's a different way of working to say, actually, 80% is good enough. And if you start to stretch into thinking, I need to really, really finesse this to the nth degree, you start to actually have a detrimental effect on your output, on what you're capable of producing, and all sorts of
stuff. It's crippling. Like I'll give you a bad example, but it's something that's happened to me in the past couple of weeks. Is that I have been sat here trying to get the playing with the lighting, the colouring, and on my webcam to make it look really good in Zoom calls and stuff. And actually, it needs to look fine. It needs to look 80%. But I've spent so much time dialing it in that actually I look very odd now when you're on a Zoom call. Because everyone else has got their laptop on the desk and then just facing up at their chins, and there's me going, "Hi guys, glad you could join me." I look like the Zoom host.
Welcome to my palace.
Yeah, and so I think when you worry about things and become so much of a perfectionist, you worry about stuff too much, and then you're not putting the stuff.
You're not focusing energy in the right place. Yeah.
No, I've done it so much, and it's a very, I feel that if you're a perfectionist and you can't get to where you want, that's where frustration and increased anxiety, I feel like that sort of thing lies therein.
Yeah.
And I just don't feel that can be massively productive. So weirdly, I've been operating at 80% in the past couple of weeks. I've got so much more done. And it's been,
if you have received a slightly brief email from Tom Barnes in the last 2 weeks, because he's operating at 80%.
Well, no, so 80%, as
only writing 80% of the email, just trailing off.
Yeah, right. All the and it's kind of, but it's, I have also this, with the Great Simplification, I know I've talked about in the past, my Tom Mow's book. I've started a new to-do list system. Phenomenal. I've started using Kanban boards.
I really want to drop in like some kind of 1980s kind of propaganda music for every time you now in future mention the Great Simplification.
What am I going to call it? I just called it TGS.
Call it the Great Simplification. I love it. It's like people will be talking about it for years.
Well, it's actually going very well. I'm going to move my drawers now. Obviously, for the podcast listeners, that doesn't sound massively exciting unless you think I'm talking about my underwear, which is then definitely not exciting. I have got loads of different plastic storage things here in my office, right, Greg? I think you've seen them, because obviously we have lots of fun on our Zoom calls. I've managed to get myself, in the Great Simplification, every single one of those was crammed full of stuff. Full. Like, could not get them out. Some of them were so full. Now, they are 60% empty. Completely empty.
It's a lot of percentages being banded around now.
Well, I'm just guessing it's 60%. There's, just over half of them are empty. But I'm made up. I'm like so chuffed.
Are they 60% full because you're operating at 80% of your perfectionism?
No, because that would be 70%, wouldn't it?
I don't know. I'm getting confused.
No, I've got nothing. and also, you'll see later in this podcast, I talk very proudly about my economics degree. So clearly didn't work. But yeah, the simplification and a realization that perfection maybe actually is hurting me has meant that the past month has been uncontrollably productive. I've had a really great start to the year from that sort of thing.
Well, I'm glad to hear it. That's good.
And I've just had an email that your gift is on the way. Mm-hmm. So it will definitely arrive with you tomorrow. Cool.
Well, on that note, shall we crack on with the show?
Yeah. I think that would be nice. Let's get to it.
This week, we are very happy to be joined by Jim Campbell. Jim Campbell is the course leader at the BA Photography degree course, which is run at the University of West England, otherwise known as UE Bristol. Thanks for joining us today, Jim. How are you? You're coming to us from the West Country, are you?
I'm coming to you from the village of Rington, which is a sleepy little village by quite close to Bristol Airport. So it's about 20 minutes into work. And I'm sitting in my son's bedroom because there's too much going on downstairs. Too many dogs, too many children.
Too many tips.
So, Jim, just tell us a little bit about yourself, your background, and you've been teaching now at Bristol and running the course there for over a decade, right?
Yeah. I've been here. I came from Bournemouth, so I was teaching onto two degree courses, two photography degree courses at Bournemouth. Initially, the course that's the BA photography course, and also the commercial photography course. And then I came here 12 years ago. I was teaching theory initially, and then I took over the course leadership of BA photography about 10 years ago. Yeah.
Okay. And so with the course that you run, I mean, neither myself nor Tom studied photography. We both studied different degrees before kind of getting into photography. So we're kind of a bit green to this. Obviously, full disclosure, I've actually been down to speak to your students at UWE in the past. That's how we know one another. But what can students expect to kind of learn on a course like yours?
Well, it's I've been a long time, obviously, in photography education, and I suppose my ethos was learnt from both of the courses that I taught on over in Bournemouth, and it's a sort of, in a way, it's a marriage of those two courses in that we're looking to kind of produce artists with savvy. I mean, that's the strap line that we run with when we're advertising the course. It's a deliberately general course because mostly we're dealing with people who are coming onto the course at kind of 19 years of age, the majority 19, 20, something like that. And of course, they don't know quite what sort of photographer they want to be. Why would you at that sort of age? So it's a general course. The staff team is designed really to cover those kind of general bases. So we've got people who are kind of fine art photographers, or people interested in photography books publishing. We've got people interested in sort of socially engaged practice, in more kind of commercial avenues, interested in fashion, and so on. So, we've got a broad team, and it's designed to sort of offer students a sort of a taster menu, if you like, in the first year, from which they then kind of progress and navigate their own way through to kind of leaving the course. And we want them to have quite a clear idea of where they want to go. And that's the idea, to give them a direction after the 3 years.
And I mean, obviously, you must see kind of quite a few, as you said, quite a variety of types of people and types of students that come in and go onto the course. And then, as you've been there over a decade, you must have seen some of them kind of move on from your course to do all sorts great things, I imagine.
Well, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. We run an annual alumni day, in fact, and we've just had that on Friday. So on Friday we had 5 alumni talks. Alex Ingram, who's I don't know whether you know Alex. He's a freelance, essentially portrait photographer. Most of his work's about kind of people. Just had a thing in the Guardian on Saturday as well. So Alex,
he's been doing quite a lot for New York Times as well, actually, hasn't he? He's done that really good project that he did on the kind of people living on islands, stewards kind of living on islands, which I thought was great.
Yeah. So then, and we had and then Manon Wime, who is a graduate of the MA course. She's again a kind of I don't know whether you could call her a portrait photographer. She's a woman of many parts. She earns quite a lot of money through post-production and retouching in the fashion industry. But she made this project called Altered, which was her kind of degree, her MA degree project, which has garnered lots of awards. So she's a polyglot, very useful for students. Mm-hmm. And then we had Jasmine Bruno, who made a fantastic degree project and is now assisting Helene Binet, the architectural photographer. We have Bella Phillips, who is working for Making Pictures. So she's a photographer's agent now. And then Mike Swan, who was working for the BBC, he's an MA graduate, and he at the time he was doing one of those little workshops with Void, the publishers Void. They do this kind of bookmaking workshop. So it's really good. It was really good.
It's nice, I guess, because you've got such variety in terms of where people end up. Because I guess the one thing with it's difficult to teach in some ways is how people are going to find ways that work for them to make a living. And it doesn't necessarily have to be in photography in a practical sense. It can be kind of around it, whether or not that's retouching or post-production, as you said, or other things.
Well, it like I say, it's a general course, and people tend to go into very broad career paths when they leave. So, and what we try to do is keep those options open as much as we can. So the kind of photographers that come in as guest speakers, and I think, generally we have about sort of every year we have over 20 guest speakers coming in, because currency is a real important factor on the course. And those speakers come from a big variety of photography sort of discourses, but also the kind of facilitators, the picture editors, stylists, art buyers, publishers, and so on. So we try to involve the image makers as well as the image takers, if you see what I mean. But the majority of the guest speakers are photographers, because that's what the students want to engage with. They want to find out about their process, about their inspirations, and their education, and so on.
Sure. Are there any key kind of skills or traits that you've seen in the some of your students that you think are generally found in the ones that really make success out of their career post education?
I think it's that kind of Sharkovsky thing, that commitment is part of the big deal, and also with the ones that are really good, it's being good and having that magical thing when you pick up a camera and it fits, as it were. The Picasso dictum about when inspiration strikes, it has to find you working is a good dictum. So it's hard work. I mean, people have to have an aptitude, of course, but hard work and appetite. I mean, appetite is so big, and if people are ambitious to succeed, they generally will. They generally will. The skills base is enormously important. I mean, what I've found, you were asking me before about the kind of changes in education, and I think when I first started, when I was teaching with a guy called Conrad Tracy over in Bournemouth, the people that we took onto the course back then, it was a slightly smaller course than I'm dealing with now, but virtually everybody came onto the course with a foundation diploma. So people would do the A-levels, and sometimes they wouldn't do a photography A-level, they'd just do an art A-level or something. And then they'd do a foundation diploma where they could spend almost an entire year dedicated to photographic processes and learning, not only the how to use camera kit, but also a bit of the history and theory of photography. Mm-hmm. Well, the government more or less closed down most of the foundation diplomas. They still exist, they're still around, and some of them are really good. But what we see now, and I think that's across the UK in terms of photography HE, is most of the students coming directly in from A level, or if not A level, then a high national diploma. So the glorious thing of the foundation diploma is a rarity. It's a rarity to see those. And so the first year of the degree course has got to be packed with workshops. It has to be about, to a certain extent, jumping over that technical hurdle. So we organise it in that way. We do 4 main things in the first year in terms of processes. We do a studio kind of brief, which is about making portraits and still lives and controlling the studio environment, making sure that they're able to kind of light a studio environment properly. There is an analog brief where we send them out into Bristol with a Hasselblad and a 5.4 and ask them to make black and white images around a spirit of place. So they're trying to articulate what that place actually feels like, what it kind of means to them. And then they come back and they process and print those images themselves in the extensive darkroom facilities at UWE Bristol. And then the other 2 are bookmaking, because it's the big deal, isn't it, now in photography? Everybody that once perhaps might have aspired to a solo show somewhere aspires, it seems to me, to make a book, and rightly so, because it's the best way to see photographs. So they in that rotation, it's an open brief, they can shoot what they want, but then it's about learning to edit a sequence of photographs and to actually physically make a book, so that they know what that kind of takes. And then finally, moving image is the last brief that we set in the first year, because of course, as you know, as a working photographer, very often you're commissioned to produce moving image as well as stills, and we feel they need that in their locker. So they produce 2-3 minute film with the soundtrack, again with an open brief. So those are the four kind of briefs that we set in the first year.
And that's an interesting point that you raise there as well, because ultimately, as you said, with a moving image, there must be elements of that you're having to kind of adapt to and incorporate on the course as technical changes happen, as platforms emerge that weren't there before. It also must mean to some extent that you've got to kind of keep your finger on the pulse a little bit, because suddenly you're going to have people coming in that have learned the basics of photography, up to the age of 18, 19, how they got into it because of platforms that didn't even exist 5 years ago, or something like, mobile phone photography as their introduction. Whereas, for my generation, and I imagine your generation, it was kind of normally your way into photography was somebody handing you down a camera that was somebody else's and that you played around with, whereas now it might be somebody picking up their camera phone and then learning everything off YouTube or TikTok or something like that. Yeah,
I think that's true. But then again, I think those who, let's say, aspire to become photographers, long before they get to us, they've realized that they need to put their phone down and pick a camera up. I don't think we've taken anybody as a student who is just a camera phone photographer. So not that I'm having a go. I'm a big fan of camera phone photography, but they tend to want to produce things that other people are not.
Yes,
which is in part as kind of the sort of minor revolution in analog photography is that's accounted for that. I think people simply wanting to make their work look different or pursue it at a different kind of process. So, analog is more and more popular.
You've been kind of teaching this course for a while now, have you noticed that in the last couple of years, students are coming to you with a higher level of technical knowledge and expertise, regardless of what they're shooting on? Because I would be interested to see, obviously I think you and your course have been quite flexible and moving with the times. Like you say, you're kind of adding in a moving image side to it. I wonder if the college courses maybe aren't as flexible and as up to date as what you're offering, but then the access to all the information, if you want to learn any technique, it's on YouTube. They by the time they come to you, they've probably ingested, hundreds of hours of knowledge that maybe the generations previous hadn't.
I think it's a kind of balancing thing, because essentially people are, people will go for the short, sharp solution to what pleases their eye. Mm-hmm. So they're only going to go for those online workshops if they can't please their eye with a mobile phone, and so to kind of stretch themselves. I wouldn't say that people's technical skills have improved. No, I don't think so. I think it's pretty much balanced out, really, because of course, years ago, when I started and people were ostensibly using an SLR, and then if they were lucky, they'd have access to dark rooms. Everything was slower, more meticulous. People, I think, were taking more time to frame pictures properly. And partly that's why we set the analog brief, because it slows people down and stops people keeping their finger on the trigger and think before you go out there and think what it is that you want to shoot and how you want to do it. So I don't think things have necessarily improved. No, I think it's as it ever was, except with different kit.
I guess as well, the thing with doing the brief is trying to encourage people to create something tangible at the end of it, because there's nothing that makes you kind of more excited about the visual medium than to actually have something physical rather than just an image on a screen. How do you kind of feel, though, with regards to photography, in general, in terms of the outlets now for students when they leave the course? Because obviously the editorial world is still exists and is there, but it's not what it was, although there are probably more independent magazines than there used to be.
Well, yeah, in terms of what the students kind of produce and what they want to produce, they always want to to produce a show, a kind of degree show, and in normal circumstances we would hang that at the university, and then we would take that to London. The last few years, apart from last year, we've been to the big free range thing at Truman's Brewery on Brick Lane, with the kind of photography fortnight that they run there. But we've shown it at the Barge House Gallery and Proud and the Rag Factory and Candid Arts and different places. So that they always want a show, a big. They've worked for 3 years. They want a big hurrah, and that it's. Lots of universities last year, because of the pandemic, made a sort of digital showcase, which is great because there's nothing else that was on offer really at the time. But there was a big miss. I mean, the degree show is really important to people because it's part of the process is finishing and seeing the ink on the page and producing that kind of killer image that goes on the wall.
Also, the discussion, I guess, that comes out of it, because you're probably less likely to have discussion over something on the digital medium because of the nature of it being so not throwaway, but so kind of temporary. And ultimately, a large part of any kind of academic course is intellectualizing your work and discussing it and being able to analyze it. And it's far easier to do that if you have a finished printed piece.
Well, exactly. And, I mean, if I'm in that sort of free range kind of situation, there are people walking around, you're sort of talking to Emma Boquet or Sean O'Hagan or whoever it might be, the people that can make a difference to a young photographer's career, and of course they want to get their work seen by those people tangibly, as you say, and it is much more, it's more palpable when they can see it in print form.
Yeah.
So this year we're going for a book. I think we're going to put our energies into producing a publication. We always do, but this year usually it's the show is the big thing, and then the publication goes with the show. And we're going to twist it around so the book is the big deal, and then God willing, we'll be able to launch it at some kind of event eventually. So that's what we're doing.
Is it a case as well I mean, I'm quite envious of your position in a way, because I imagine the satisfaction that you get from teaching and kind of leading the course, but also seeing the students develop. There must be so many lessons as well that you learn in parallel to them learning.
Oh, absolutely. It's a fantastic job to kind of to try and be a catalyst, and encourage people to indulge their obsessions, which is what we do. And it's kind of that the big thing. What I realized, because when I started teaching photography, I started teaching from a very theoretical perspective. I did a couple of theory degrees, and I'd read and read and read, and I'd seen pictures from a kind of an abstracted sort of level, rather than as a photographer and then getting into it through being a photographer. And what I sort of learned over the time, and also started making pictures, being inspired by the students that I was teaching. I was teaching them theory. They were kind of teaching me practice back. And so I learned kind of from them and from the staff around me at Bournemouth and then at UWE. And it's all about personal work. I mean, that's what we do at UWE. And I think I learned that there was no formula for success. You couldn't learn a sort of a bag of tricks from a professional, and that would do it for you. That you had to make your own path. You had to think about what was meaningful to you, and then build from there. And I think the personal work has. I said years ago, thinking it doesn't really exist. It doesn't exist in any other medium. Do you know what I mean? It's kind of, I would think that graphic designers generally, everything is a kind of professionally orientated thing. But I think with photographers, it's so important that you keep your obsessions alive and keep shooting personal work, something that is not dictated by a commercial brief or even by trying to impress the marketplace, just for you.
I think rather than it not existing in any other medium, I probably disagree, but I think it's referred to in a slightly different way. I think in music, for example, if when Prince died, You're
breaking up on me a bit there, Tom.
Sorry. Oh, sorry. I was going to say when Prince died, he left a vault full of material, completely unreleased. No one knew about it, and I can't remember what the story was, but there was a song in there, and he could have released a song every day for 4 or 5 years. Such was kind of the amount of stuff in the vault. But I think in photography, we call it personal work, and then in other kind of areas, it's just passion. It's just they
Passion
do it
project.
because passion projects. I think we're really lucky in the way that we can use our passion projects as personal work and them have then some sort of commercial leaning because we can just say, look, actually, this is what I really love. Whereas, go on.
It's interesting because yesterday was Sunday. No, let's try Friday when we had that alumni day. Bella from Making Pictures, and I've heard this from all. We've got quite a lot of alumni working in as photographers agents, and Bella said she only shows personal work. So the portfolio work is all personal work, and I think that speaks volumes. And whenever a guest comes into us in front of the students, I'm trying to say, well, we've invited Greg in, or we've invited whoever in to talk about their personal passions and how they kind of make a living from these passions. But it's always the personal work that people are interested in. The students want to see the personal work,
But also, I think commissioners want to see the personal work.
Exactly.
I used to have a real mixed book, and people would be like, "Yeah, that is cool," and their interest would kind of die off as they started to look through the commissions, and they know what commissions look like. They know that I think people put them in to kind of show that they can do them. I now stick a few at the back, right at the very back, as jobs pages, but the rest of my book is pretty much purely personal work because that's the stuff. But also, it's the stuff when you're in the meeting you can talk very passionately about.
There's also a balance though of sometimes, I mean, we've both had it where you've gone for a job and it's kind of gone back and forth, and then they said, the actual job itself is photographing dogs, and we've seen that you photographed a couple of golden retrievers, but we've got like a brown Labrador that we want you to have you ever photographed a brown dog? We want examples just to make sure you can, and it can get really specific, and you're like, surely you understand that I can turn my hand to this. But I think, and normally that doesn't come from the agency, that might come direct from the client, or if you're doing the job direct to client, it might come from.
I think that the big one of the differences, I remember years and years ago at Bournemouth, we had the photographer's agent Mark George in, and Mark George at the time was representing Dan Byrne 40 amongst his on his books, and now Dan Byrne 40 is with Making Pictures. And back then, I think that when Mark was showing, we had Dan in as well as a guest speaker. And when he showed his portfolio to us, there was virtually I don't think there was any personal work at all in his portfolio, none at all. And now with Making Pictures, it's all personal work. I think that's been a big change. And that's what we do. There's no, in terms of what we set the students in the first year, the briefs are 6 weeks long. These 4 briefs that I'm talking about, and then in the second year, there's only 2 briefs that we set the students, and they're sort of kind of 12-14 weeks long. And then in the final year, there's a sort of warm up thing, but essentially they can, if they want to, they can spend the entire year making one project. So it's about the depth of the project rather than quick turnaround stuff. It's important to be able to respond to a deadline, obviously, and we try to set little things like later on today at 12 o'clock we're setting industry briefs this year because of the lack of work experience that's been around because of the pandemic. We thought, well, we've got modules that run all through the course on professional practice and work experience. There is no work experience. What we're going to do, so we've invited 4 people in to set briefs, and so these kind of shorter things. So we've got Max Ferguson in as another alumnus from the FT and Port magazine. He's going to set an editorial brief. We've got Tracy Marshall Grant from the Bristol Photo Festival. She's going to set a curating brief. Alice Zhu is going to set a writing brief. and we've got Ellie Bird coming in from Wyatt Clark Jones, who's going to set a commercial brief. So, trying to, set them things that are going to ameliorate the lack of work experience, I suppose, is what we're trying to do there.
When you say a writing brief, sorry, again, okay, definitely not. I'm university educated, but with an economics degree rather than photography. Why is a writing brief?
Well, Alice is a photographer and a writer. So she is, she writes for BJP, she writes for Splash and Grab, blah, blah. And it's a sort of, she's in that kind of position where she's quite a big player, and she's used both her photography and her writing to kind of support the family tree, as it were, of contemporary photography. Do you know what I mean? So she's writing about other photographers. She's writing about with a kind of thematic thing. And I think if a photographer can come out of a degree course like ours and be able to write about photography eloquently, it's another potential string to their bow. Do you know what I mean? It's something.
Totally get it. If anything, I wish I had. I wish I had the ability to write properly. It is actually a real skill set that I think us as photographers completely, forget to include. There's so many things that we need to write, even just from social media captions to blog posts to being able to pitch the work to pitches themselves. There's writing comes in so handy.
It's a rubbish that you can only communicate in emojis, isn't it?
Well, yeah, no, it's just the aubergine emoji.
Those grant applications seem to just never come through.
We part of that kind of professional practice thing. We try to school people in writing artist statements, in CV writing, in pitching, quoting, invoicing, all that. All those kind of mechanics, but and also interviews. My wife is part of the HR team at the Arts Council, and I haul her in to the picture, and we do a kind of a day of mock interviews, and then we interview the students for a job that they select. So we try to prepare them, as much as we can. But the writing thing, we had Izzy Radvanska-Zhang in a couple of weeks ago talking about writing and talking how she structures her writing, and talking about the BJP as well. And the BJP, I suppose, has been for me, when Simon Bainbridge sort of relaunched it, it's been a good thing to point at for applications to the course. And if they say, well, what should we be looking at? Generally, I say, well, you do worse than the BJP. It's nationally available. You can buy it from WH Smith's, and it's a decent magazine.
Yeah, and it's been going, since 1854 or something. I mean, it's insane.
Yeah, but in very different iterations.
Oh, very much so. Yeah. Well, when they did their rebrand and their relaunch, it was probably about 10 years ago now, was it?
Yeah.
It really was a black and white difference. Excuse the photography reference, but it was night and day. Is better. On one of our previous guests on the show, we had Kate Abbey, and she was talking about how she'd gone back to study a master's. And it's something I've often considered as, if I had the money and the time, I think it would be a fascinating thing to do, because it must really rekindle one's connection with photography and everything around it. As Tom said, talking about kind of learning to write or learning to kind of, it would have totally changed the way that you intellectualize and analyze your photography and your work and your practice.
It's that feedback thing. It's the kind of just being able to talk to like-minded people about your work and their work is a fantastic thing. I mean, for me, I did, because as a useless theory head, I did a theoretical MA. It was fantastic. And now the MA that we run at UE, that Aaron Schumann is heading up, is, yeah, I mean, it must be a great thing to be part of as a student, because it's that relatively small group. We're all pretty much on the same page. So people like Emily Graham, who was working at Magnum, came in and did that MA course. And we've had some terrific graduates already. So
I also think it's interesting, because ultimately when you start working as a photographer, it's very easy to kind of lose that network of people that you can talk to. And we have discussed it before on the pod, kind of how back in the day the labs would be maybe somewhere where you would drop your film in and you'd bump into another photographer and you might have a chat and a coffee. And since, well, actually there's been a bit of a resurgence in people going into labs and printing. But if that isn't something you do, then where do you find that? We had Matt Martin on the pod, who was talking about Photobook Cafe and the kind of photocopy club that he started. And again, somewhere like Photobook Cafe has now become a good place. Well, not at the moment, but somewhere where you could go and meet. God, I remember that when we used to physically meet people and be able to discuss stuff. So it must be quite interesting and a bit of a shock sometimes for students when they leave those kind of 3 years of studying and they go out into the world. And if they aren't working for a photographer or they aren't working within an agency, if they immediately try and go and freelance, it can be tough. It can be isolating and quite kind of...
it massively so. And I think that's one of the reasons why we try to encourage people to collaborate with each other, with their peers, not just the photography students, but the graphic designers, the drama students, the fashion students, and so on. Because very often that's the group of people that they sort of carry with them into their working life, and the people that they'll continue to collaborate with. That is enormously important. And I think that's why the degree show, which is a big undertaking, it's a big old thing to kind of produce, is really useful in that, because they bond very often over the production of the degree show.
Yeah.
Out of curiosity, you obviously say you encourage them to collaborate and things like that. It's a tough world. Coming out to be a photographer is got to be, my uncle is an advertising producer and told me when I was 17, I was like, I think I might go to university to study photography. And he said, think about this. Maybe, because I'm sure you've heard this from a lot of students. He goes, maybe go and study something that if you don't succeed in photography, you can fall back on, hence my economics degree. But he kind of had pre-warned me that it was one of the most competitive and toughest industries to succeed in. How are you honest with your students from the kind of the get-go? Are you kind of like, just so you know, it's kind of brutal? Or are you like, well, I guess you'll find it out? Or do you what do you do to prepare them to have a thick enough skin?
Yeah, it really is a tough one. I think in making sure that they've got the sort of transferable skills that we try and give them in terms of just a professional attitude, with that suite of modules around working in the world, is very important. Keeping it general so that you keep those different avenues open is really important. And I think it is important. It's you can't be negative. You can't be negative, because there's nothing really to be gained from that. But you just say, look, it is really tough. It's super competitive. How are we going to best prepare you for this trial by fire? And that's what we do. That's what we try and do. And and I say when applicants come in, the last thing that we want you to do is be sitting on your bed playing your guitar at the end of 3 years, because then we haven't served you well. You need to know how to put your wares in the shop window and then see what you can do with it. But it's I've had I remember a student years ago from Bournemouth who talked to me at a degree show, saying that she didn't realise just how tough it was, and that I mean, for her, she was a mature student at the time, and she didn't realise just what a slim pickings there were out there for photography graduates. But it can be done. It can be done. It's like with Alex Ingram is a good example. Trying to do what he has done, and sort of because he graduated in 2016, and then he managed to get a few really useful assisting gigs, and then just has built himself up to be in as strong a position as he can be, I think, in the current climate. So it can be done, and it's great to have some successful alumni to point at to our guys to say, well, this is a possibility.
I will say that's incredibly responsible. I over the years have had a lot of students. Actually, I don't think any from UWE, but I've had a lot of students that have reached out from various universities. Some are local with the College of Arts over in Farnham, and some in Falmouth, and kind of all over the country. And they've kind of reached out and said, would you consider, a phone call? And I always try and take the time to do it. But it always surprised me when I've had the chats with those that maybe the courses haven't been preparing them in the same way yours does, and they kind of felt like their course was very intellectually driven. They weren't learning a kind of a variety of skills, but with yours, it sounds like it is, best preparing people.
Well, yeah, it's a balancing act, because of course we want people to be informed critically and theoretically. So we want them to do the research that underpins what they're doing. I'm a sad old fart that goes with the kind of mantra that you can't create in a vacuum. So you have to know what's gone before. You have to inform yourself by lots of reading. But if you don't know what to do with that, that's a crime, isn't it? If you've read up and you're making terrific work, and then you've no idea of how to make that into a successful career, then that means that we've failed the students. So it is about a balancing act, really.
Yeah,
and it's also a tough one.
I guess it's also making people aware. A lot of this is you can kind of get through life, just kind of coast. But actually, if you're not aware that people might want motion or something like that, you need to be made aware, or you need to make yourself aware of what the market would want or what clients would want and things like that. And a lot of the times when I've had students kind of coming in, they're kind of going, we've been told not to worry with websites, and Instagram's, the pure way forward. And I always kind of raise both eyebrows quite strongly. And I kind of, whenever I chat to them, we have these, again, quite eye-opening chats. And I kind of, I don't know, I've always been a bit of a skeptic of kind of photography courses in general, because obviously I'm a gigging photographer. I've done it, without, but I do wish throughout my career there had been points where I maybe had studied a photography degree, just so I could have come out with, because I feel like I'm 36 now. I feel like I'm, almost 18 years into my career. I still feel like I'm making quite rudimentary discoveries from time to time. Not less on the tech side, but more on the negotiation side or things like that. And I feel that if I had been given a better grounding, that maybe I would have made those mistakes a lot earlier in my career.
I think, it kind of, it takes all sorts, and it's kind of that some people, as Greg was saying before, that idea of going back to education is what some people do. Some pretty successful gigging photographers feel that kind of need to go back and make work sort of in separation from those kind of commercial pressures. Mm-hmm. And nearly always they enjoy it. I mean, Max Ferguson, for example, is just starting the MA course with us, and he's doing it because he's basically been full-time kind of editing for various publications since he left, and he's neglected his personal practice, his photography, and he wants to kind of rekindle that flame. And so the MAs that of which there are a number, obviously, are kind of designed for that sort of reason, and I think they're working really well.
I also think,
Tom, there we go.
Yeah.
This is it. Do you know what? I am actually, after we chatted to Kate Abbey the other week, I have actually been thinking about it, same as Greg. Actually, I kind of fancy it. Well, here's a question. If I did come to you and say, hey, I would like to maybe join the MA course, would I have to have a degree in photography? No. Or would 18 years of experience count?
No, you wouldn't have to have a degree in photography. Aaron is looking for all sorts of people with all sorts of different experiences. And the big thing is to have an investiture into photography and an open mind. Yeah, that's what he's looking for, I think.
I'm out then. Yeah, no, to be honest, it does. And I think we all probably get to a point in our careers where we kind of feel that actually maybe, something like that might help us refocus or not even necessarily refocus, maybe broaden our kind of our intake of art or inspiration or all sorts.
I think that there will actually be a bit of a uptick in people wanting to do this kind of stuff after a year in isolation of the pandemic, because actually people find ways of intellectualizing photography by going to exhibitions or going to openings or going to things like Arles or Perpignan or whatever. And because we've had such a distinct lack of that last year and may well have it again this year if more stuff gets cancelled, there's a real gap in people feeling like they're actually connecting with photography. It's just people are stuck in their heads and working with stuff online in these kind of little echo chambers rather than actually being exposed to different ideas.
And I think the people have been concentrating on their own kind of existential crises, haven't they? So it's that kind of accent, what is worth doing in this life kind of question. And that creativity comes to the surface. So I think what I was going to say about Aaron's course is that he wants you to come in with a project idea. So that, I think in common with a lot of MA courses, it's kind of, what do you plan to do? So he's interested in you fulfilling a project whilst on the course.
Well, if you get a massive uptick after this podcast goes out, you know where to send the check.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, I think we're probably going to start bringing things to a close. Obviously, we have our final questions that we always ask our guests, which are our photo books and cameras.
Photo cameras.
Your chosen ones to take to the island. So what do you have for us, Jim?
Right. Well, look, you sprung this on me like I should be familiar with your podcast all the way through, obviously. It's my fault, yeah. So the photo book, I've got many. I've been collecting them for a lot of years. But can I go with two? Am I allowed two?
Well, what are they?
Right, okay.
How small are they?
They're very different. Well, one is Raised by Wolves by Jim Goldberg, because I remember I bought it, probably, I don't know, 15 years ago or something more than that. And it's been a sort of it's now in a tatty horrible state, having, many students have borrowed it over the years, and it's just that, as I guess I like the combination of images and text in a kind of, in that case, in a very sort of informal, human kind of manner. And the other one, am I allowed?
Tell us what it is.
I've got to mention this one. Okay. Well, the other one is Iris Garden, which is a little book. The photographs are by William Gedney, and again, there's a lot of text in the book by John Cage, and John Cage has collected little stories from kind of just American life, and the counterpoint of the text and the image is just beautiful, and it's a loose leaf thing in a case. So you can put them together in lots of different ways. It's just a beautiful thing.
Is it the green one with the typewriter font on the front of the case?
It's typewriter font. It's grey, sort of.
Is it grey?
Grey, yeah, that's the one. Yeah,
it looks lovely.
Well, can I say, beautiful thing?
I will allow you to have that.
I was going to suggest that you should go for the second one, because I feel that definitely someone at some point is going to take Jim Gelber's Roads by Wolves anyway.
All right. Well, my first thought was Iris Garden, so I'll go with Iris. Yeah. Okay. And the camera. Well, my camera of choice that I bought from the former chief technician at UE is a Hasselblad. I don't know. It would be a kind of, because I'm still sort of besotted with the kind of like analog process. So it would be a close one between the Hasselblad and an RZ, I think.
Which Hasselblad is it? A 503?
Yeah.
Lovely.
Yes, it's a lovely thing.
Well, I mean, if you had to end up looking at it more, you'd probably want to take the Hasselblad, right? Depends how far you're walking as well, because the RZ is bloody heavy.
I was going to say, how big are your muscles? Like,
yeah, but it's a desert island, so I'm not going to be doing that much walking. I remember years ago, I went with Aaron to listen to Stephen Shaw at the Photographers Gallery, and it was when he was relaunching the nature of photographs, and he was just flicking through the slides, and one of the slides was a square format picture, and he said something like, yeah, square format. Never really got on with that. And he moved on. And I thought, I'm not going to let him get away with this. So I asked him, put my hand up and said, so why not the square format? What's wrong with that? And there was a long pause. And he went, it's just wrong, isn't it?
It's just wrong.
It's just wrong. That's what he said. It's just wrong. He said that in his mind's eye, he never sees in squares. He always sees in wide angle, so he can't get to grips with the square. So
formats,
I suppose,
they appear and then they become normalized. So, for example, the iPhone screen size. 5 years ago, people hated watching any footage that had been filmed vertically, and now there's been so much of it that's been done that way that will be part of our history, and that will be, just accepted. As when you watch it, to the point where they're thinking about designing TVs that are now vertical rather than horizontal, and it's crazy. So it's an interesting. I understand his point of view in that sense of his aversion to the square, but yeah.
Yeah, I think it's a close one. I'm just going to go with the Hasselblad.
Tell you what, though, if I can play devil's advocate, if you did take the RZ, you could obviously use it as an axe, a hammer, all sorts. Yeah. Build yourself a house.
A robust piece of kit. Yeah.
Certainly is. Well, Jim, listen, thank you so much for taking the time coming on the show. It's been a super interesting chat, and really appreciate you taking the time.
No problem. Thanks very much, guys.
Hey, guys, and thank you so much for listening to the latest episode. If you'd like to stay in touch, there are a number of options for you to reach out. We can be emailed at info@exposenegative.com, and you can find us on the website at exposenegative.com or on Instagram at xnegative, We're pretty good at responding to DMs on there. And we're also on Twitter at Exposed Negative. You can find us personally on our own private accounts on Instagram. Tom is tombarnes.com and I am just Greg Fennell. Cheers. Thanks for listening.